You can be part of trials that aren't insane. You don't have to do a 3-day study like I did. You don't have to give vials of your blood like I did. You don't have to give a piece of your tissue like I did. But I think even the small surveys do make a big difference. Like, your voice is powerful and your story is powerful. And I think at the end of the day, there's people that did clinical trials for the drugs that we're currently on now. And without them and without that data, we wouldn't have the drugs that we have today. Hey everyone, welcome to season 3. This is Shauna.
And this is Rosalina, and we're your hosts for Too Young for This Shit podcast. This podcast is not just about boobs, but a journey with cancer. We are young millennials, open about giving you our raw and unfiltered look into our lives. We are in no way medical professionals, nor are we offering medical advice. Any medical references are cited directly from public websites or from our personal diagnosis. Some topics and stories may be triggering to those who are fighting, have fought, or have loved someone with cancer.
Welcome back to the Too Young for This Shit podcast. This is Shauna. Today's episode is just going to be me talking about my experience with the 4 clinical trials that I was a part of. Rosalina also has done a clinical trial, but has had like a completely different experience than I have. So our episodes are going to be separate for this topic. I guess I'm just going to dive in now and talk about the 4 clinical trials that I have been a part of since being diagnosed with breast cancer. So my first clinical trial, I was approached by my breast surgeon, Dr. Freya Schnabel at NYU. This was when I was going through the genetics process, getting genetic testing done after being diagnosed, and trying to figure out and going back and forth to see her through that process. And she had asked me if I wanted to be a part of her clinical trial, which is called the Breast Cancer Database at NYU. And the Breast Cancer Database is a volunteer research study, and the purpose of the study is to establish and maintain a complete longitudinal database of all breast cancer patients treated at NYU. The data from the study will help them discover more about what causes breast cancer and how to treat it. The database will be an invaluable resource for academic research, and the data will help them with assessment of screening processes, current breast cancer treatments, overall outcome, and quality of life and survivorship issues. So when I was approached by my breast surgeon and my breast surgeon's nurse practitioner about this study, I was very open to it. I was open to it because there was no risk to me being a part of the trial. Essentially, they were just going to use my information and my pathology. I had to sign a consent form, and they were going to use the pathology of my tumor and just kind of keep it on file and build this database for as long, I guess, as they need to for the study. And the one thing that I said, like, there's no risk to me being a part of the trial, and the trial doesn't actually benefit me, but it will help benefit future breast cancer patients. And I kind of actually really like the idea of being the data for other people, I mean, down the line, because it's like, if it's not me and if it's not other people participating in this, we don't have any of this information, and it can't help anybody in the future. So it was also just like a study I did not have really to do much of, and I don't ever really think about it. It doesn't affect my day-to-day life. And this was like a volunteer research study. I was not paid. This is an ongoing, like I said, an ongoing study. So there won't be any data for me to personally see. So the second clinical trial that I was asked to be a part of was also at my cancer center at NYU in New York City through my breast surgeon, Dr. Freya Schnabel. And this study was called the Flow Variant Analysis for Prediction of Hereditary Cancer Risk. So I actually didn't realize I was a part, that this was like a second clinical trial when I initially signed the consent form. I thought that the breast cancer database at NYU and this study, the Flow Variant Analysis study, was the same study. So I was a little confused up until doing the research actually for this episode. So essentially, the flow variant analysis for prediction of hereditary cancer risk is an ongoing study. It's still happening right now at NYU. The goal of this study is to improve the accuracy of genetic testing for prediction of breast cancer risk. The study will provide a proof of concept for a new method called flow variant analysis, or FVA, and that will determine whether it can predict the results of genetic testing as accurately or more accurately than the methods currently used. So for this study, again, I signed the consent form for the database at NYU study and this flow variant analysis study the same day. That's where the confusion came from of being two separate trials and not one. This was like another study that really was no risk at all for me. So it was kind of easy to sign up for it. The only thing I had to do, like I said, was sign a consent form, and I had to give a few vials of blood. So I did my first vial of blood after I finished. So that was back in December of 2021. I went back twice in 2022. I believe they were 6 months apart. I didn't have to go out of my way to like go into the cancer center and do these blood draws. Like they did it, during appointments I had already scheduled. So that was actually really nice. Like I didn't have to really do much of anything again for this trial. It was actually really nice because the times that I did come in, this was not a paid trial, but every time I gave blood, my breast surgeon had gifted me an Amex like gift card, like a $50 Amex gift card. So it was like kind of like a nice incentive to keep coming back and giving blood for the study, but I didn't expect it. It was just a nice little cherry on top of getting blood taken. And this trial, like I said, is ongoing. When the data does come out, it will be a study as a whole. It will not be like my personal results of the study. It will be everybody who's participated in. This was, again, these two trials, I was approached by my breast surgeon about these trials. In the beginning of my diagnosis, there was so much to navigate as far as, like testing and figuring out surgery and waiting for other test results. And just, there was always so much going on that I wasn't looking for clinical trial options at this time. So it was actually kind of nice to like be approached by it and be able to participate and be able to help future breast cancer fighters deal with their diagnosis and have data that will maybe help them in the future. So that's like I said, like another kind of like feel good reason to be doing these clinical trials. The third clinical trial that I participated in was a caffeine cream clinical trial. And this was also through NYU. It was through my radiology oncologist who approached me with the opportunity to participate in this study. The clinical trial that I was a part of at NYU is called Radiation Dermatitis, Phase 1 randomized double-blinded placebo-controlled study of the safety and efficacy of a caffeine-based anti-fibrosis cream in patients with breast cancer undergoing radiation therapy. It's basically a red coat study, it says in parentheses. I will link the clinical trial in the show notes for anybody who would like to know more about it. The purpose of the study is to evaluate whether a caffeine-based cream can reduce the rates of complication in patients with tissue expander-based reconstruction requiring post-mastectomy radiation therapy when compared to a placebo cream. So the study was that during radiation, in the morning and in the evening, I had to apply essentially it was a lotion, and it could have been the caffeine cream that they're testing, or it could have been a placebo cream, which meant that there was no caffeine in it. And I was essentially just using like a basic lotion every day. So I had to do that in the morning and the evening, going through radiation. And then 6 months after radiation therapy was completed. So I was approached for this study during my pre-appointments for my radiation. And like it was, I think, during my tattoo mapping that the nurse of my radiology oncologist had approached me about this study at NYU. And I listened to all the information, and I immediately was like, I'll do it. And in my head, it didn't seem like a risk because the cream, regardless of whether or not it was the actual caffeine cream or not, it was still going to be a lotion. So it was not going to harm me. It was not something I was like putting into my body. It was something I was putting on my body, and it was completely safe. And I looked at that as like not really being like a risk for me. So I was pretty eager actually to be a part of this trial. And another thing I want to mention, so as far as caffeine goes, caffeine can also act as a endosine receptor antagonist. So it's in caffeine that adenosine and antioxidants promote wound healing. And the effects of caffeine on wound healing is like currently unknown. So this is the study to try to see if like caffeine essentially has wound healing properties. On top of the cream I had to apply twice a day for 6 months, I had to log all of my caffeine intake throughout the day. So it was a paper log. So every day I had to mark off when I put the lotion on in the morning, when I put the lotion on in the evening, and then how much caffeine I had throughout the day. So whether it was coffee, tea, if it was chocolate, I had to try to figure out how to measure. Like if I had a chocolate chip cookie, I'm like, I don't know how many chocolate chips were in the cookie, but I would just be like, I would have to write, had chocolate, had a chocolate bar, had a brownie, like, or had a chocolate chip cookie. Like I had to literally write down everything that contained caffeine every day, which, I mean, it was really annoying to do. I mean, there was days where like I would forget to log how much I had, or there would be like days where I forgot to apply I fell asleep early and didn't apply the cream in the evening. But, I was very honest with my log and tried to do my best to like make sure I filled it out every day, and it was as accurate as possible. The cream that I had to apply, I was also able to apply that with my other creams. So when you're going through radiation, calendula cream is like the cream that they tell you to use to moisturize your skin throughout radiation and protect your skin. My radiology oncologist also gave me the go ahead to use Aquaphor because I felt like calendula wasn't really working as well as it should have for me. I was also given the okay to use aloe. So especially during radiation, I was using this caffeine and or placebo cream along with the calendula, along with the Aquaphor, and along with aloe. And it was just like this very insane mixture of goop that I had to apply. It was like a very doable thing for me. It was, again, annoying to have to be like regimented about it, but it wasn't like, oh, this is so annoying, or this is like cutting into my like day-to-day life. It wasn't anything like that. It was what it was, and I was fine to do it. At the end of the study, I finished the 6 months, had all the logs. I was about to have my exchange surgery. So my tissue expanders taken out and my implants put in. And the nurse practitioner from my radiology oncologist called, and it was actually kind of funny because she called and I thought like somebody had died or something really bad had happened because she had this like very scared tone in her voice. So I was at work and she called, and then I got really concerned, and I was like, is everything okay? And she's like, yes, we just wanted to ask you if we could get a sample of your tissue during your exchange surgery so that we can test the tissue for the study. I kind of laughed at her because I thought something was wrong, or I didn't do something right, or I didn't log something in right, or something bad happened. And I was like, I think she was like nervous to ask for something like so personal, like a piece of my skin. She was really nervous about it. But I was totally fine with it, especially for the study. If it was like going to help, I was totally fine with them taking a sample. So during the exchange surgery, they took a sample and I was out cold. So again, it didn't really affect me, it didn't hurt me. I probably wouldn't even have known if they had done it and didn't get my consent. But I did have to sign a piece of paper consenting that I could have the tissue sample taken. And yeah, that was kind of like the end of my time with that trial. That trial is still ongoing. So there is no data currently available, but I again will get the full trial data, not my personal data. Like I will never know if I actually had the caffeine cream or if I had the placebo cream. I'm okay with that. If I can just know what the study entailed and if it ended up helping, because down the line for people that did radiation, like that could be a real game changer for skin healing after radiation. So again, there was no risk for me. It was doable. And I mean, the cream was a little greasy. I'm not going to lie. I didn't love the cream. I did have to wear like really cheap t-shirts throughout the 6 months just because I didn't want like any of my good clothes to get ruined. But it was manageable. And I feel really happy that I did the study. So for my final, for my final clinical trial that I've been a part of thus far was I found this clinical trial actually through a company called Rare Patient Voice. Rare Patient Voice is a company with a website that connects patients and caregivers with the opportunity to voice their opinions through surveys and interviews to improve medical products and services. So I had first heard about Rare Patient Voice through the Cancer Patient Instagram account. I've talked about the Cancer Patient Instagram in the last 2 seasons of the podcast. It's like one of my favorite accounts. And I one day was like scrolling through the stories of the Cancer Patients Instagram, and they had posted a link to a study for breast cancer patients, and it was paid, and it was basically just like a link to sign up about it. So I clicked the link and I go to sign up, and I have to fill out like a little bit of an application form. Basically, I had to give all of my information and all the information on my diagnosis. So I had to give, say, my type of breast cancer, my stage of breast cancer, when I was diagnosed, what type of surgery I had, what type of treatment that I had. And I mean, it was like probably about a 10-minute application time. Like it didn't take me all day. It was pretty quick. And at the end of the application, I just submitted it. I was approved, and then I was able to fill out a survey. So one of the first surveys I ever did was for a drug called Verzenio, which now I'm like currently taking. It was like a 20-minute survey. And at the end of the survey, I think I made $60. And I was like, this is kind of great. I can use this experience to obviously like do these surveys and then also make some money. I just did it like while I was like on the subway on the way to work. Like it was like kind of a no-brainer, and it was also like easy. And so I thought the website was like great. So Rare Patient Voice sends out basically email blasts. Like that's anything that is like pertains to your diagnosis. So I would say I get a couple of emails a day from them for all different types of breast cancer surveys. And it's not just for breast cancer. It's not just for breast cancer. It's all cancers. It's for caregivers. It's for like a whole array of diagnosis. I mean, anything from like anxiety, depression, every different type of cancer, eczema. It's all different types of things. So it's not just for cancer patients. I opened one of the Rare Patient Voice email blasts in September of 2022. And the title of the study was Breast Cancer In-Home Interview, 3 days, $3,350 reward. And I ended up qualifying for this study. So I sent in my information, and I think it was about 3 days later, I had heard back from the head of this study. And they called me and wanted to schedule a Zoom call and give me like more information about what the study entailed and what they were looking for. So during the Zoom meeting, I found out that one of the stipulations of the study was that you had to be on ovarian suppression. At the time, in September of 2022, I was not on any type of ovarian suppression. I wasn't on any type of hormone therapy, period. I had let them know that I currently wasn't on anything, but I had taken it for more than a 6-month period the year before, especially while I was undergoing chemotherapy and radiation. So because I was on it for more than 6 months, I was able to qualify, and they were like really eager to have me on board. I think they loved the idea that I had a podcast, that I put myself out there, that I'm like very open to sharing. And they really were like, we think you would be great. We're going to move your application along. And I think by the end of that week, They had called me and said they wanted me to do it. It would be a 3-day study. It would be for 5 to 8 hours a day. And I basically had to do nothing but live my life. And somebody would just come to my home and just kind of like follow me around, record me, ask me a couple questions. And she wanted to see what my life was like in survivorship, being a breast cancer survivor, my thoughts and feelings on hormone therapy. I ended up being like, I want to do this. And honestly, the amount of money that it was for 3 days is the real reason I did it. I think that if I was getting paid maybe like $350, I would be like, for 3 days, probably isn't worth it. For, you know, $3,350, it was very, very much worth it. So I participated in this 3-day research study. I had this awesome woman named Angela follow me around, and I did not like nothing about my 3 days with her was like interrupted. I did everything I would have done whether or not she was there or not. And it wasn't weird having somebody I didn't know like come to my house and like sit on my couch and ask me questions, or like come to doctor's appointments with me, or like I think she came to like the drugstore with me. Like none of that felt awkward to me because it was like things I would have done anyways, and she made me feel so comfortable from the jump. This woman walked all over New York City with me. I mean, she must have walked in those 3 days probably like 30 miles because we were all over the place. We were uptown, we were downtown, we were all over Astoria. I mean, she was like such a trooper. I mean, subways, we walked, I mean, it was like everything. She came with me and attended an appointment with me at my surgeon's office for like my liver mass that I have, that I eventually do have to get removed. And she came with me to that appointment. She got to see the scan and hear like what that surgery was going to entail. And I remember her being like, it doesn't really end at you're done with treatment and it just ends. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Like clearly I have like a whole other mess of things that I have to deal with after my breast cancer diagnosis. So she got to see that. She got to see like how much I move throughout the day. She got to hear about my job. She got to come to other doctor's appointments with me. She got to ask me like so many questions about my thoughts on hormone therapy. And I got to be so honest and real about my feelings about hormone therapy. The sponsor of this study makes a CDK4/6 inhibitor that is part of adjuvant hormone therapy, and the sponsoring company wanted to know how it can better advertise to breast cancer patients and create programs that like are useful to you. And it's funny because I had basically said, if it comes down to quality over quantity, I will always pick the quality of life, because my experience on ovarian suppression was so horrific that I never wanted to be on it again. And they actually use that quote in the study. And part of me thinks like, if this is somebody that's making an ovarian suppression drug or a hormone therapy drug, and like they're hearing a breast cancer patient who went through all the treatment, radiation that I did and the surgeries and all this stuff, to basically say, I'm not taking this, and I would rather risk not taking it than feeling as awful as I did on this medicine. So I'm like really actually glad that I was able to provide that type of information to the people that make these drugs, because I feel truly that we deserve better after putting our bodies through what we did, going through breast cancer treatment, and it should not be this hard for us. So I will say, Angela had listened to my podcast before she came to my house. So it kind of felt like she knew me. And I was like sitting on a couch. Like she was asking me things about my life that she had heard from the podcast. And it was just so casual. It was so natural. It was so organic. Honestly, I think that's what made it so much like easier for me to like talk about my experience with hormone therapy, and for her to kind of get information out of me that I maybe had not shared on the podcast. And I feel like I am like a pretty open book on this podcast. Like I really do share like my true authentic feelings, and that might not be what other breast cancer patients would feel, especially after going through breast cancer treatment, to basically say like, I did all this and now like fuck hormone therapy. But she was asking me she was pulling things out of me that like I didn't think about, or it was just like natural. And it was like, I think the podcast was great for her because like she came in like knowing what she wanted to ask me the whole time, and knowing, I think she kind of knew what she wanted to get out of me for this study. Honestly, this was a study that I'm glad that I signed up for, not just because I got paid that amount of money, which obviously was incredible, but because, like I said, these companies pay for these research studies, are the ones making these drugs, or like tailoring programs or tailoring campaigns for breast cancer patients. So I'm glad that maybe that little quote has them thinking like, how can we do better for breast cancer patients, and how can we make better products that we don't have to suffer after already suffering. And again, like there was really no risk to this study for me to be a part of it, and it really was kind of like all benefits. Again, not just because I got paid, but like because there was a couple of benefits from this. Because Angela had listened to my podcast, she also has been like an awesome plug for our podcast. Like she has dealt with other breast cancer patients, even younger than me or younger than Rosalina, and she's passed along the podcast to other people, which I think is just so incredible. I think another benefit, obviously, is the more data, like the more benefit it will help like other people down in the future. I honestly felt like every clinical trial worked out exactly the way it was supposed to. I think especially like being approached for the first 3 was great because, like I said in the beginning, like everything is such a whirlwind. You're not like thinking about what else can I be doing? Like I'll try anything. I wasn't even thinking about what can I be a part of? What data can I provide? I wasn't thinking anything like that. So to be approached by it and to know that these studies are out there was amazing for me. And then to have a platform like Rare Patient Voice where I can go out of my way to sign up for different studies or different trials is also amazing, because it's I just get it in my email. Like I don't know that these things are out there. I'm not every day on my computer looking for clinical trials to apply for, or to just like be updated on. I am definitely open to more trials in the future if it like applies to me. I'm okay with being the guinea pig for like a lot of things. I don't know if I'd want to like put something into my body, like to take like a medication that, there's no data on, and to like be that data. That does scare me a little bit. And it's actually kind of funny because I'm currently taking Verzenio, and that is a very new drug. Their data is still building as more people are taking that drug. And I'm okay with that, because there is some data that says that this drug actually works. But I think like if I had gotten asked to be on the Verzenio trial, I would have probably shot that down. I think another reason why I'm like hesitant to do like medication trials in general is because I have a ton of medication allergies, and it just makes me nervous anytime I have to try a new drug, or like even like a new vitamin. It's like a panic for me. So I think in the future, just knowing that I'm not willing to take like a medication is good for me, because that's just not something that I would even like look into, or, I don't have to kind of like, I don't want to say waste my time, but I don't have to just like, that's not what I'm going to be looking for. But when it comes to a survey, or even just like an in-home study like I did, I'm so open to that. It does take some time, like minimal time. Like some of the surveys can range from 10 minutes to an hour, or an hour and a half. And it's kind of cool. Like if you can get paid for it, that's your time, that's your diagnosis, that's your story. If you're going to reap some of the benefits of that, that sounds amazing. But I'm also okay with doing it to benefit other people. Like I feel like that's just as rewarding. So if you're looking to find clinical trials, I would say start with your medical providers, start with your cancer center. They have research teams that work on a ton of clinical trials, and they would be able to tell you what you would qualify for. I have already mentioned the Rare Patient Voice website, which has been amazing. And we have a link and a referral code for Rare Patient Voice for you guys, and that will be in the show notes. You can be part of trials that aren't insane. You don't have to do a 3-day study like I did. You don't have to give vials of your blood like I did. You don't have to give a piece of your tissue like I did. But I think even the small surveys do make a big difference. Like, your voice is powerful and your story is powerful. And I think at the end of the day, just there's people that did clinical trials for the drugs that we're currently on now. And without them and without that data, we wouldn't have the drugs that we have today. So it doesn't have to be big. You could do smaller trials or smaller surveys. Anything helps. A very special thanks to our podcast producer, Bethany Allard, and our podcast editor, Ayla Anderson.
Thank you all for listening and supporting our podcast. Sharing our stories with you has been incredibly healing for both of us, and we hope it helps other women in their journeys through breast cancer.
Ladies, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and fellow breasties. Help us reach more women by subscribing and rating us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at TYFTS Podcast and email us at tyftspodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, so shoot us a message. We will link any resources from the episode in our show notes.